At this time, I want to go back to motions and resolutions for one additional file notice waiver. Mr. Holden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request unanimous consent to suspend Joint Rule 62A, the file notice requirement to allow the Revenue and Taxation Committee to meet and hear Assembly Bill 567 Gibson on Thursday, May 14, 2015, upon adjournment of session in the Rules Committee room.
Without objection, that request is granted. Colleagues, let's now move to business on the daily file. Second reading, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 775, 1424, 830, 1002, 413, 1234, 504, 661, 906, 1350, 364, 650, 903, 1295, 738 with amendments, 1119 with amendments, 1455 with amendments, 313, 347, 1532, 465, 1505, 327, 1278, 1282, 1540, 289 with amendments, 250 with amendments, 925 with amendments, 684 with amendments, 1097 with amendments, and 1081 with amendments.
All bills will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Let's now go to third reading. For file items 33 through 37, we will pass and retain. File item 38, AB 234, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 234 by Assemblymember Gordon, an act relating to food.
Mr. Gordon.
Mr. Speaker and members, California regulates most aspects of food production, food marketing, and food safety. And the primary responsibility for enforcing retail food law rests with local enforcement agencies. The California Retail Food Code requires that all food be sold, served, or donated to the general public from an approved source. Existing approved sources generally include food grown or produced on a commercial farm. Last year, I authored AB 1990, which defined community food producers and gleaners and allows them to engage in direct sales of whole uncut fruits or vegetables or unrefrigerated shell eggs to the public, to a permitted restaurant or a cottage food operation. This can be done if the community food producer complies with a variety of health and safety regulations. AB 234 would make a clarifying change to AB 1990 by authorizing a community food producer to sell or provide these products directly to a permitted food facility. The effect of changing the one-word restaurant to the two words food facility is that food facility covers a more universal entity that sells food-related products. By striking the word restaurant and replacing it with food facility, AB 234 would provide certainty as to what entities community food producers are allowed to sell their products. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Aye 61, no 7. Measure passes. Let's move to file item 39, AB 256. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 256 by Assemblymember Jones Sawyer, an act relating to crimes.
Mr. Jones Sawyer, you may open.
Mr. Speaker and members, increasingly, as the public captures questionable police practices on video, it is critical that we send a message that altering or deleting these videos will not be tolerated. Currently, it is a felony for a police officer to knowingly alter, place, or move physical material with the specific intent to wrongfully charge another person for a crime. AB 256 ensures the law will not be misinterpreted by specifically clarifying that any physical material or matter includes digital images and video recordings. This measure now covers both sworn and non-sworn law enforcement personnel. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Aye 75, no 0. The measure passes. Let's now go to file item 40 for purposes of amendments. AB 1245, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1245 with amendments by Assemblymember Cooley.
Mr. Cooley, you may open on your amendments.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise to present amendments to my AB 1245 relating to electronic filing with the Department of Employment Development. These amendments waive the penalty for filing until 2019 to ensure employers have transition time, also modify the hardship rule and other transitional provisions to ease implementation. They are a follow-up to the Assembly Insurance Committee conversations. I respectfully ask your aye vote.
Ms. Waldron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are without objection on these amendments.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, we can take a voice vote on these amendments. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted, and this bill is out to print and back on file. File items 41 and 42, as well as file item 43, are passed and retained. File item 44, ACR 47, the clerk will read.
Assembly Concurrent Resolution 47 by Assembly Member Chow relative to 529 College Savings Day.
Mr. Ed Chow, you may open.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. ACR 47 would establish May 29th as the 529 College Savings Day, which would serve as an opportunity to raise awareness throughout the state about the importance of saving our college with the help of 529 college savings plans, such as our very own state-sponsored program, Scholar Share. Today, 7 out of 10 college seniors graduating owing $28,000 on the average in student loan debt. When Californians are burdened with student loan debt at levels such as these, they are hindered in their ability to purchase homes, cars, and other products that help boost our economy. By recognizing May 29th as College Savings Day, ACR 47 will help more California families become aware of the importance of saving our future higher education expenses and utilizing 529 College Savings Plan to reduce the amount of money their loved ones borrow while pursuing their academic goals. This resolution is sponsored by the State Treasurer's Office, which oversees Scholar Share, and I hope that we can count on your support for ACR 47. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, Mr. Chow, would you like the first roll to be open for co-authors?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Okay. The clerk will open the roll. Members, this is for co-authors. This is for co-authors. The clerk will close the roll. There are 76 co-authors added. Without objection, we'll take a voice vote on the measure. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. File item 45, AJR 7, will pass and retain. File item 46, ACR 53. The clerk will read.
Assembly Concurrent Resolution 53 by Assemblymember Daly and others relative to the Richard Dick Dickerson Memorial Highway.
Mr. Daly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I'm presenting ACR 53 that will designate a portion of State Route 44 in Redding, California as the Richard Dick Dickerson Memorial Highway. Dick was a former Assembly member who served in this House from 1998 to 2002, representing the 2nd Assembly District, which I now represent. He had many accomplishments while in the Assembly, such as legislation to increase police and fire services, to restore the Klamath Basin, and a permanent tax exemption on propane and ag diesel, as well as ongoing funding for rural sheriffs. Dick served his constituents well. After leaving the Assembly, Dick served on the Redding City Council from 2004 to 2012 and was also a former law enforcement officer. Dick passed away in 2014 and left behind his wife, Betty, of 33 years, 4 children, and 8 grandchildren. Dick was an exemplary person who served his community well and is worthy of this honor. I would like the first roll to be open for co-authors, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, Mr. Daly would like the first roll to be open for co-authors. The clerk will open the rolls. Members, this is for co-authors. The clerk will close the roll. 73 ayes, 73 co-authors are added. Because this matter is fiscal, we need to open the roll for a vote. The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll. Ayes 76, no 0. The measure passes. File items 47 through 54 we will pass and retain. File item 55, ACR 35. The clerk will read.
Assembly Concurrent Resolution 35 by Assemblymember Gonzalez relative to the 27th Annual State Scientist Day.
Ms. Gonzalez, you may open.
Mr. Speaker and members, I rise today to present ACR 35 declaring May 13, 2015 as the 27th Annual State Scientist Day. The state employs nearly 3,000 professional scientists in over 30 state departments working in more than 81 scientific classifications. State scientists hold graduate degrees in virtually every scientific discipline. The work that they perform across California has deep impacts in almost every aspect of our lives. Please join me in recognizing the important work all state scientists do in California. I'd also like to invite all members to attend a hands-on exhibit and be part of an experiments that will take place on Wednesday, the 27th Annual State Scientist Day at the West Steps of the State Capitol. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask that the first roll be open for co-authors.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, Ms. Gonzalez has asked the first roll to be open for co-authors. The clerk will open the roll. Members, this is for co-authors. The clerk will close the roll. 74 co-authors added. Without objection, we'll take a voice vote on this matter. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. File items 56 through 59, we will pass and retain. And file item 60, we will take up for purposes of amendments. File item 60, ACR 30, the clerk will read.
Assembly Concurrent Resolution 30 with amendments by Assembly Member Irwin.
Ms. Irwin, you may open on your amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These are non-substantive amendments, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, we'll take a voice vote on these amendments. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. This bill is out to print and back on file. File items 61 through 65 we will pass and retain. File item 66, AB 182, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 182 by Assembly Member Alejo and others, an act relating to elections.
Mr. Alejo, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise to present AB 182, which amends the California Voting Rights Act of 2001 to allow challenges to district-based elections that are being imposed or applied in a manner that impairs the ability of a protected class of voters to elect candidates of their choice. Both the federal and the California Voting Rights Act were landmark pieces of legislation that sought to prohibit and prevent discriminatory voting practices. Currently, the California Voting Rights Act, or the CVRA for short, only permits challenges to at-large elections and allows the courts during a challenge to order appropriate remedies to protect the voting rights of a minority community. However, having no current law to protect these communities, AB 182 will further CVRA protections and ensure fair representation and accountability at the local level by preventing and correcting jurisdictions that draw district lines in a way that will further marginalize minorities. This bill is a reintroduction of a 2014 bill, SB 1365, by now Secretary of State Alex Padilla. And last year's effort by Secretary Padilla made it through both houses of the legislature, but was vetoed by Governor Brown. This year, however, with the help of our sponsors, we have taken several amendments to meet the concerns of the governor and stakeholders in hope to ensure that the voting strength of minorities communities is not diluted. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Ridley Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I simply rise to applaud the author for bringing AB 182 to the floor. This is an effort, colleagues, of those who are concerned about voting rights, about equal protection under the law, and about ensuring that all Californians can get to the ballot box to express their perspective. All eligible Californians can do so. And Mr. Alejo is to be credited, or the gentleman from Watsonville, rather, Mr. Speaker, is to be credited for his steadfast support for increasing access to the ballot box for California residents. I would respectfully request an aye vote on AB 182.
Mr. Calderon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise in support of AB 182. AB 182 promotes fair representation in California voting rights for its citizens. Voter turnout in California for 2014 was 42%, so we must ask ourselves why. The number one reason why people do not vote is because they simply do not feel that their vote doesn't count. We need to change this mentality, and we need to start by making every vote count and every voice heard. AB 182 will help to instill confidence in our citizens and show them that their vote does matter. Candidates are elected to represent the people in their political districts. Voters should have the right to step forward even if they feel that they are not fairly being represented in their district and ask that the courts to make the proper remedies. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Bonta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And thank you to my fellow joint authors, Assembly members Alejo and Hernandez, for your work on AB 182. The California Voting Rights Act was intended to protect the right of every Californian to elect a candidate of their choice by moving from at-large to district-based elections. However, not every district is created equal. In many instances, redistricting has led to communities of color being divided and the spirit of the CVRA being violated. This bill applies the existing remedies of the CVRA to district-based elections and allows, with the vote of the people, for the governing body to be expanded in order to improve representation. This is an important civil rights bill to safeguard all Californians' constitutionally protected right to vote, to end voter discrimination, and to ensure that our local governments truly reflect the diversity of our great state. Thank you, members, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote on AB 182.
Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise today as a joint author of Assembly Bill 182. This bill will expand the California Voting Rights Act to include challenges to district-based elections in order to protect democracy and minority communities across the state. AB 182 brings parity to existing law by holding challenges to district-based election systems to the same standards and procedures that currently apply to challenges to at-large election systems that are brought under CVRA. I strongly believe that district-based elections are more responsive to the electorate. I also know that in some cases, districts can be drawn to disenfranchised communities. We need to protect against these abuses. We must ensure that every citizen in every community has a voice. In a state where minority groups make up 60% of the electorate, AB 182 will ensure every voter has an opportunity to have their voice heard. That's why I respectfully and strongly urge your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, Mr. Alejo, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we're all aware, this coming August, everyone, our nation will be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965, and this year we commemorate the 14th year of the California Voting Rights Act. But with the support of the Secretary of State and voting rights attorneys like Joaquin Avila, who spearheaded the CVRA of 2001, we can go beyond the federal counterparts to continue to protect our voting rights here in the state of California. And in fact, when the courts have reviewed the California Voting Rights Act, it has been upheld as constitutional on its face. But in light of the recent Shelby case at the federal level that diminished the federal statute, this bill is our state's answer to further strengthen and enact civil rights protections for all voters in the state of California. With an outstanding low voter turnout, we cannot afford to continue marginalizing minority communities. This bill is just one more measure to ensure no one goes unrepresented. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 50, noes 25. The measure passes. File items 67 and 68, we will pass and retain. File item 69, AB 318, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 318 by Assemblymember Chow and others, an act relating to lost and unclaimed property.
Mr. Chow, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 318 alleviates financial burden and saves space and other resources for public transit agencies by establishing a 5-year pilot program to authorize public transit agencies to shorten the time they are required to store lost or unclaimed bicycles from 90 days to 45 days. Furthermore, rather than auctioning off unclaimed bicycles, under the pilot program, the bill seeks to give the public transit agencies the ability to donate directly up to 25% of any unclaimed bicycles to a charitable organization. The bill received unanimous support in both Judiciary and also Appropriations committees. I respectfully ask your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 70, noes 2. The measure passes. We're going to pass and retain file item 70, file item 71, AB 429. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2429 by Assemblymember Daly and others, an act relating to public contracts.
Mr. Daly, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Today I am presenting AB 429 on behalf of the California Forestry Association to encourage the state of California to purchase wood that is grown and harvested in the same manner as imposed upon California companies under the Forest Practices Act of 1973. The reason is to draw attention to the important laws that govern forest practices in the state and ensure that when California purchases wood, it does from those who meet the strictest environmental standards in the country. Of course, my bill requires price and quality to be the same before the California preferences come into play.
Mr. Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'm happy to rise and support and be a co-author of AB 429. As mentioned, AB 429 only requires state agencies to give preference to California-based lumber companies when purchasing timber when price and quality are equal. This all has to happen in accordance with the Timber Harvest Plan. Timber harvest practices have changed dramatically under current environmental regulations, the strictest in the country. Sustainable is a word that is now increasingly being applied to the timber industry, and this bill recognizes that the industry is alive in California, and we would like the state to buy local whenever possible. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, Mr. Daly, you may close.
Respectfully ask for an aye vote.
The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Aye 74, no 0. The measure passes. Let's move to file item 72, AB 774. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 774 by Assemblymember Levine, an act relating to alcoholic beverages.
Mr. Levine, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. AB 774 allows limited beer tastings at certified farmers markets and grants nonprofits the ability to receive donated beer for use as an auction item. This bill has received unanimous bipartisan support. Respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Aye 74, no 0. The measure passes. File item 73, AB 10004, we will pass and retain. File item 74, for purposes of amendments, AB 1338. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1338 with amendments by Assemblymember Gomez.
Mr. Gomez, you may open on the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I'm presenting AB 1338, which was originally on consent, but I pulled the bill to include a minor technical amendment. There's no opposition to the bill, and it received bipartisan support. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, we can take a voice vote on the amendments. All those in favor of the amendments, please say aye. All those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. The bill is out to print and back on file. File items 75 and 76 will pass and retain. File item 77, AB 634. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 634 by Assemblymember Calderon, an act relating to timeshares.
Mr. Calderon, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 634 will protect the privacy of Californians who purchase timeshares and prevent timeshare owners from having their personal information sold to third parties, including those entities that use the information for fraudulent purposes. Specifically, AB 634 prohibits a timeshare association from publishing or providing a list of owners to any timeshare owner or third party, or use or sell the list for commercial purposes except to accomplish legitimate association business. This measure is a careful balance of protecting the privacy and personal information of timeshare owners with the legitimate needs for owners to communicate amongst themselves for association business purposes. This bill has no opposition. I respectfully request an aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Aye 75, no 0. The measure passes. File item 78, AB 691. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 691 by Assemblymember Calderon and others, an act relating to estates.
Again, for Mr. Calderon, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. As Californians increasingly use the store information online on services like YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and email, it is important to consider what happens to all the private information collected on their various online accounts after they pass away. A recent poll found that 70% of Americans say their online communications and photos should remain private after they die, unless they gave prior consent for others to have access. 65% of Americans say it is a violation of their privacy if their information is shared without such consent. In the same study, only 15% said a state attorney should have the discretion to decide what happens to their private communications and photos after they pass away. AB 691 addresses this issue by striking a balance between providing a clear path for fiduciaries to access relevant information to handle the deceased person's estate, while also respecting the privacy choices of not just the deceased person, but those with whom the deceased was communicating. There have been several attempts nationally to create a model for other states to use in order to address this issue. But California has an opportunity with the passage of AB 691 to take the reins and to be the champion for the tech industry. This measure is supported by Facebook, the Internet Association, Cal Chamber, SEIU, TechNet, the Center for Democracy and Technology, as well as several other organizations. This bill currently has no opposition. I thank you for your time and respectfully request an aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 76, no 0. The measure passes. Let's move to file item 79. We're going to pass and retain file item 80, AB 1031. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1031 by Assemblymember Thurmond, an act relating to public employee health benefits.
Mr. Thurmond, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise to present AB 1031. This bill has to do with some of our most cherished public servants, firefighters, and their post-retirement health benefits. As you know, state law does allow for employers to pay post-employment health care contributions. However, some of our firefighters who have these employer-paid post-employment health contributions are required to pay premiums out of their own pocket and are not reimbursed by their employers as they should be. This is simply because of a loophole that says that if you receive Medicare, you are required to pay for your Medicare Part B premium, and the employers do not reimburse these firefighters. This law would close this loophole, and it would require an employer that contracts with CalPERS for health care to continue to meet the needs and obligations to provide any collectively bargained, statutory required, or vested post-retirement health care contribution, including reimbursement for Part B premiums owed. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Alejo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question for the author.
Objection.
Since this was your first bill, I was trying to read this bill late last night, but it was a snoozer of a bill, and I fell asleep in the process. But since my colleague is part of both the Black Legislative Caucus and the Latino Legislative Caucus, I thought a better way to spicing this bill up is if you might give us a description of this bill on the floor today in Spanish.
Mr. Thurmond, you can choose to respond to that now. Wait for your close.
I'd be happy to address it in my close.
Great. Any further discussion? Mr. Williams.
Well, I think we all look forward to hearing your biliteracy skills. I ask for an aye vote on this bill.
Mr. Williams.
I rise on behalf of the API Legislative Caucus. Are you going to try to join our caucus too?
I'll assume that's a question of the author without objection. Mr. Thurmond?
It's an honor to be a member of this assembly body.
Dr. Weber.
Yes, Mr. Speaker and members, since obviously the Latino caucus and the Asian caucus have concerns, I'd also like to hear you do your close in Ebonics.
Mr. Linder.
As an associate member of the Jewish caucus, as well as Mr. Thurmond, I'd like to see if we could also have this bill described in Hebrew or Yiddish.
I have one word for you, shalom. For my Latino brothers and sisters, paz or peace. In the Ebonics, let's get on with it. I'd like to close.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, Mr. Medina.
As a proud member of the Panamanian caucus, I'm wondering if the assembly member might be able to give us a Panamanian dicho.
Without objection, again, Mr. Thurman, you can choose to answer that now or in your close.
I'm prepared to address all concerns raised about this bill in my close.
Great. Ms. Eggman.
Thank you. As the chair of the LGBT caucus, and this is a firefighter bill, I'm just wondering if you did the proper research and did an overnight in your local fire department.
Mr. Thurman, you could really choose not to answer that if you like, or you could answer it in your close.
I'm going to be requesting that we all take a visit to our local fire station together. We'll do it as a group.
Okay, at this time, Mr. Calderon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. And as the self-appointed chair of the Legislative Surf Caucus, I was wondering if you could also do your close in a little bit of broisms.
Without objection, again, Mr. Thurman.
Hang 10, dude. Let me close.
Okay, at this time, seeing and hearing no further debate, Mr. Thurman, you may choose to close in Hebrew, Ebonics, Spanish, or Broism, or English.
I simply say thank you to all the members for all the love that you want me to be a part of your caucus, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Thurman. At this time, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 78, noes 0. The measure passes. Let's move to file item 81, AB 1291. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1291 by Assemblymember Williams, an act relating to retirement.
Mr. Williams.
Members, this bill is not about firefighters or customer data. This bill is about the Ventura County retirement system, which is asking to be granted some independence from the county. It's a district bill which will make the Ventura County retirement system an independent public employer district within the Ventura County Employers Retirement Association and authorizes the system to appoint specified positions as at-will employees. The main benefit of this is to assist in implementation of the Public Employee Pension Reform Act of 2012 and will help ensure the fair and equitable administration of the county retirement system in accordance with the law. Ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The ayes 75, noes 0. Measure passes. Let's go to file item 82, AB 2. The clerk will